His hand froze mid-air, the fork suspended between his plate and mouth as time seemed to stop. There she was, walking through the restaurant door with her hand resting protectively over her swollen belly. Her deep brown skin glowed under the soft lighting of the upscale restaurant, and her hair was styled differently than he remembered, but there was no mistaking who she was. James felt his chest tighten as memories flooded back, memories he had tried to bury beneath his new life, his new success, his new love. Across from him, Olivia was talking animatedly about her day at the art gallery, completely unaware that her boyfriend's world had just tilted on its axis. "James? Are you listening?" Olivia's voice finally broke through his trance. He blinked rapidly, forcing himself to look away from his pregnant ex-wife and back to his current girlfriend. "Sorry, I thought I saw someone I knew." Olivia turned slightly in her chair, following his gaze. "Oh? Who?" Before he could stop her or formulate a response, Olivia had already spotted the woman being led to a table across the restaurant. "She's beautiful. Is she a friend of yours?" "Friend." The word hung in the air like a bad joke. How could he possibly explain that the pregnant woman settling into her chair was the wife he had left behind 5 years ago when his business was failing and their bank account was empty? The wife he had divorced when he decided that starting fresh meant cutting all ties, including the ones bound by marriage vows. "We used to know each other," he managed to say, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. James tried to focus on his meal, on Olivia, on anything other than the fact that his ex-wife was pregnant and dining alone just 30 feet away. But his eyes kept drifting in her direction, and with each glance, his discomfort grew. She hadn't noticed him yet, at least he didn't think so. The restaurant was dimly lit, and they were seated in a secluded corner, a special arrangement he had requested for what was supposed to be a romantic evening. Olivia reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "You seem distracted tonight. Is everything okay at work? Or his company?" The business that had finally taken off after years of struggle, after he had walked away from his marriage. Now he was CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country, with a sleek penthouse apartment and a beautiful girlfriend who moved in the same exclusive social circles he had only dreamed of before. "Work is fine," he said, forcing a smile. "Just a lot on my mind." He tried to focus on Olivia, on her delicate features and the way her blonde hair caught the light. She was everything he thought he wanted: sophisticated, connected, ambitious. They had been dating for 6 months and everything had been perfect until tonight. As the waiter arrived with their main course, James risked another glance across the restaurant. This time his ex-wife was looking directly at him. Their eyes met, and he saw the moment of recognition cross her face. She didn't look angry or surprised, just steady, with a calm dignity that made his chest ache with something like shame. He quickly looked away, but the damage was done. She had seen him, and now he would spend the rest of the evening wondering if she would approach their table, wondering what he would say if she did, wondering what Olivia would think when she learned the truth. "Who is she really?" Olivia asked softly, her intuition picking up on the tension radiating from him. "You keep looking at her." James took a deep breath. He could lie, make up some story about an old colleague or a distant cousin. But suddenly he was tired of the pretense, tired of running from his past. "She's my ex-wife," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Olivia's eyes widened. "You were married? You never told me that." "It was a different life," he said, the excuse sounding hollow even to his own ears. "Before the company took off, before everything changed. And now she's pregnant," Olivia observed, her tone unreadable. "Are you okay?" Was he okay? James wasn't sure. Seeing his ex-wife pregnant had stirred something in him he couldn't quite name. Was it regret? Curiosity? Or something deeper, something that made him question the choices that had led him to this moment? As the evening wore on, he found himself unable to fully engage with Olivia. His mind kept drifting to the past, to the small apartment he had shared with his ex-wife, to their dreams of building a family together someday, to the promises he had broken when the going got tough. By the time dessert arrived, he had made a decision. He needed to speak to his ex-wife, if only to acknowledge her presence and perhaps offer some kind of belated apology. But when he looked across the restaurant again, her table was empty. She had gone, taking with her the chance for any resolution. Olivia was watching him closely. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. James shook his head. "Not tonight. Let's just enjoy our dinner." But as they finished their meal in awkward silence, he knew that something fundamental had shifted. The careful walls he had built around his past were beginning to crumble, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to face what lay in the ruins. Outside the restaurant, as they waited for the valet to bring around his luxury car, James caught a glimpse of his ex-wife stepping into a taxi. She didn't look back, but he couldn't take his eyes off her until the taxi disappeared into the flow of traffic. "James?" Olivia's voice sounded distant. "Oh? I asked if you want to come back to my place tonight." He turned to look at his girlfriend, seeing in her eyes a mixture of confusion and concern. "I think I need some time alone tonight," he said. Rain check. As he drove Olivia home in silence, James couldn't shake the image of his ex-wife's pregnant form from his mind. Who was the father? Was she happy? Did she ever think of him? And why, after all this time, did seeing her affect him so deeply? These questions followed him home to his empty penthouse, where he stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. 5 years ago, he had convinced himself that leaving was the only way forward, that his ex-wife deserved better than a failing entrepreneur with mounting debts and broken promises, that a clean break would hurt less in the long run. Now, with the empire he had built around him, he wondered if he had been running away rather than moving forward. And as he poured himself a drink, he realized with startling clarity that despite all his success, there was a void in his life that no amount of money or status could fill. The encounter had awakened something in him, a need to make amends, to understand what had happened to the woman he had once promised to love forever. And perhaps, in doing so, to finally make peace with the man he used to be. The next morning, James woke with a heaviness that coffee and his usual workout routine couldn't shake. Images of his ex-wife kept flashing through his mind as he went through the motions of his carefully structured day. In the sleek conference room of his company headquarters, he found himself nodding along to presentations without really hearing the words, his thoughts 1,000 miles away, or rather, 5 years in the past. "Are we boring you, Mr. CEO?" His chief marketing officer's teasing voice snapped him back to the present. "Sorry, rough night," James muttered, straightening in his ergonomic chair. "Let's take it from the top." But concentration eluded him. By noon, he had dismissed his executive team and retreated to his office, closing the door on his concerned assistant's offers of lunch. Alone at last, he opened his laptop and hesitated for just a moment before typing his ex-wife's name into the search bar. What right did he have to look into her life now, after walking away so completely? Yet his fingers moved of their own accord, and soon he was scrolling through search results. There wasn't much. She had never been one for social media or public attention. But he found a link to an art gallery where she apparently worked as a curator now. The gallery specialized in works by emerging artists from diverse backgrounds, with a focus on community engagement. It was exactly the kind of meaningful work she had always talked about doing someday. Almost without conscious decision, James found himself driving across town that afternoon. He told himself he just wanted to see the gallery, maybe catch a glimpse of her from afar. No confrontation, no awkward conversations. Just confirmation that she was doing well. The gallery was in a renovated industrial building with large windows and a welcoming entrance. James parked his luxury car a block away and approached on foot, feeling oddly nervous. He paused outside, looking at the current exhibition advertised on posters. Motherhood, diverse perspectives. The irony wasn't lost on him. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door and stepped inside. The space was airy and well-lit, with artwork arranged thoughtfully throughout. A few visitors wandered the exhibition, speaking in hushed tones. There was no sign of his ex-wife. James moved through the gallery, genuinely impressed by the powerful artwork depicting motherhood in various cultural contexts. He was so absorbed that he almost didn't notice when a voice spoke behind him. "I didn't expect to see you here." He turned, and there she was, more beautiful up close than she had seemed from across the restaurant. Her pregnancy was more pronounced in the fitted dress she wore, and her eyes held a quiet strength that made him suddenly aware of his own racing heart. "Hello, Rachel," he said, her name feeling both familiar and strange on his tongue after so long. "James?" She nodded, professional and composed. If seeing him affected her, she hid it well. "Are you interested in the exhibition, or is this a coincidence?" They both knew it wasn't a coincidence. He could have lied, claimed he was just passing by, but something about standing in this space dedicated to honesty and art made that impossible. "I saw you last night," he admitted. "At the restaurant. I wanted to make sure you were okay." A small smile touched her lips, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm more than okay, James. But thank you for your concern." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with unspoken words and shared history. A visitor approached with a question, and Rachel excused herself to help them. James watched her move confidently through the space, explaining a particular artwork with passion and knowledge. This was her domain, and she belonged here in a way that made his heart ache. When she returned to where he stood, her professional mask was firmly in place. The gallery closes in 20 minutes. Was there something specific you wanted to discuss? James hesitated. What did he want? An absolution he didn't deserve? Information about her pregnancy? A chance to explain himself after 5 years of silence? Coffee, he said finally. Or tea if that's better for. He gestured vaguely toward her belly. Rachel studied him for a long moment, and he braced himself for rejection. But finally she nodded. There's a cafe next door. I can spare half an hour. 30 minutes. After 5 years of absence, that's what their relationship amounted to now. A half-hour coffee break between strangers who once shared everything. The cafe was quiet in the late afternoon lull. Rachel ordered herbal tea and James asked for black coffee, though his nerves were already jangling without the caffeine. They sat at a small table by the window, the low sun casting long shadows across the street outside. You look well, Rachel said, breaking the silence. Success suits you. Thank you, he replied, feeling oddly ashamed of his expensive watch and tailored suit in her presence. You look happy. She smiled, a genuine smile this time. I'm happy, James. Very much so. He couldn't help himself. And the baby? Everything's good? Rachel placed a protective hand over her rounded belly. Everything is perfect. She's due in 3 months. She, James repeated softly. A daughter. In another life it might have been their daughter. Look, James, Rachel said, her voice gentle but firm. I appreciate the concern, but I'm curious about why you're really here. It's been 5 years without a word. The question hung between them, demanding honesty. James stared into his coffee cup, searching for the right words. Seeing you yesterday, it brought a lot back, he finally said. When I left, I told myself it was for the best. That you deserved someone more stable, more successful. That I was doing you a favor. He looked up, meeting her steady gaze. I've spent 5 years building the life I thought I wanted, and then I saw you across that restaurant and I realized. Realized what? She prompted when he trailed off. That I've been running. That maybe all this, he gestured to himself, his watch, his success, was just a way to prove something. To myself, to the world. To you maybe. Rachel sipped her tea thoughtfully. I'm not the same person you left behind, James. That woman was devastated when her husband walked out instead of facing our problems together. She spent months wondering what she did wrong, why she wasn't enough. Her words cut through him like a blade. Rachel, you were always enough. It was me. I know, she interrupted gently. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I know now that it wasn't about me. Your leaving was about your own fears and insecurities. And realizing that was the first step in rebuilding my life. James felt a lump form in his throat. I'm sorry, he said, the words inadequate but necessary. I should have been stronger. I should have stayed and fought for us, for our marriage. Rachel nodded, acknowledging his apology without immediately accepting it. Why did you come looking for me now, James? What do you want? It was the question he had been avoiding even in his own mind. What did he want? Forgiveness? Reconciliation? A second chance he didn't deserve? I don't know, he admitted honestly. When I saw you, pregnant and glowing, something broke open inside me. All the feelings I thought I'd buried came rushing back. I guess I needed to see you to know you're okay. To say I'm sorry, even if it's years too late. Rachel studied him, her eyes searching his face. Apology accepted, she said finally. We all make mistakes, James. Some bigger than others. But life goes on. Your husband, James began hesitantly. Is he? Not in the picture, Rachel replied, surprising him. This baby is being born into a different kind of family. I have amazing friends, supportive colleagues, and a community that can't wait to welcome her. I chose to be a mother on my own terms. James tried to process this information. Rachel had always wanted children, had talked about a big family when they were together. He had always been the one to put it off, claiming they weren't financially ready. That's brave, he said sincerely. It's what's right for me, she replied with simple certainty. I spent too long waiting for the perfect circumstances, the perfect timing. Then I realized perfect doesn't exist, but right does. This is right for me now. Her words resonated with an uncomfortable truth. How much of his own life had been spent chasing an illusion of perfection? Rachel glanced at her watch. I should go. I have a community art class to teach this evening. James nodded, not wanting their conversation to end but respecting her boundaries. Thank you for this. For hearing me out. As they stood to leave, Rachel paused. It was good to see you, James. I hope you find what you're looking for. She left him standing in the cafe, watching through the window as she walked away, her posture straight and confident, one hand resting protectively on her belly. The guilt and regret he had carried for years felt heavier now, but alongside it was something else. A growing awareness that he had built his success on a foundation of running away. Back in his car, James sat for a long time before starting the engine. His phone buzzed with messages from Olivia and notifications from work, but he ignored them all. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of what he had lost when he walked away from his marriage. Not just Rachel, but the man he had been trying to become with her by his side. As he finally drove away from the cafe, James knew one thing with certainty. Seeing Rachel again had changed something fundamental inside him. And nothing, not his company, not his penthouse, not his carefully constructed new life, would ever be quite the same. The next week passed in a blur for James. During the day he went through the motions of running his company, meetings, decisions, the constant buzz of business that had once energized him. But his mind kept drifting to the conversation with Rachel, to the quiet dignity with which she had rebuilt her life without him. At night, alone in his penthouse, he found himself pulling out old photos he had kept hidden in a box at the back of his closet. Pictures of a younger, less polished version of himself with Rachel, hiking in the mountains, cooking in their tiny first apartment, celebrating the day they had signed the papers for their modest starter home. They looked happy, their smiles genuine in a way that made his chest ache. When had he started believing that success meant expensive suits and luxury cars instead of that simple happiness? Olivia had been texting him all week, her messages growing increasingly concerned and then frustrated as he gave vague excuses for canceling their plans. He knew he owed her more, but he couldn't find the right words to explain the turmoil inside him. Finally, on Friday evening, he invited her to his penthouse. She deserved honesty, not ghosting. "I was beginning to think you were avoiding me," Olivia said as she stepped into his apartment, her tone light but her eyes wary. "I'm sorry," James replied, gesturing for her to sit. "I've had a lot on my mind." "Because of seeing your ex-wife?" Olivia asked directly. She had never been one to dance around difficult topics, which was one of the things he had admired about her when they first met. James nodded, pouring them both a glass of wine. "Yes, I went to see her, actually. After that night at the restaurant." Olivia's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "You tracked her down? Why?" It was a fair question, one he had been asking himself all week. "I needed to apologize," he said finally, "for how things ended." "And did you?" "Apologize." "I did." She was gracious about it. Olivia studied him over the rim of her wine glass. "There's more to this story than you're telling me." James sighed and moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. The view had once represented everything he had achieved, but now it just felt empty. "When I left Rachel 5 years ago, my business was failing. We were in debt. I convinced myself that I was a burden to her, that she deserved better. So instead of facing our problems together, I walked away." The admission hung heavy in the air. "I told myself it was for her sake, but the truth is I was scared. Scared of failing, scared of letting her down." Olivia joined him at the window, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. "And now? What are you scared of now?" The question cut straight to the heart of his turmoil. "That I've been running all this time. Building this company, this life?" He gestured to the luxury surrounding them, "to prove something. To justify leaving her. And seeing her pregnant, moving forward with her life without me? It made me question everything." Olivia was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was measured. "Are you still in love with her?" It wasn't an accusation, just a simple question that deserved an honest answer. "I don't know," James admitted. "I think part of me never stopped loving the person I was when I was with her. We struggled financially, but we faced it together, until I couldn't anymore. She made me want to be better, not just more successful." Olivia set down her untouched wine glass. "I think I understand," she said quietly. "This isn't really about her or me. It's about you figuring out who you are and what you actually want." James turned to face her, struck by her insight. "I'm sorry, Olivia. You deserve someone who isn't questioning everything about his life." She gave him a sad smile. "Yes, I do. And you deserve to figure out your answers without hurting anyone else in the process." She reached for her purse. "Take the time you need, James. Just don't expect me to wait around while you sort yourself out." He walked her to the door, feeling guilty for the pain he was causing but knowing it would be worse to pretend everything was fine. At the threshold, Olivia turned to him. "For what it's worth, I think the fact that you're questioning your choices means you're not the same man who walked away 5 years ago. That has to count for something." After she left, James sat alone in his spacious living room, surrounded by expensive furniture chosen by an interior designer, artwork purchased for investment rather than love, and the trappings of success that had once seemed so important. None of it felt like home. He thought about Rachel's small, modest apartment above the art gallery, filled with color and creativity and the promise of new life. That had felt more like a home in the brief moments he had glimpsed it than his penthouse ever had. The next morning, instead of heading to the office, James drove to a neighborhood he had once known well. The coffee shop where he and Rachel used to spend Sunday mornings was still there, though now it had a trendy new sign and higher prices. He ordered a simple black coffee and sat at a corner table watching people come and go. Families with young children, elderly couples holding hands, teenagers laughing over shared jokes. Ordinary people living ordinary lives filled with the kind of connection he had sacrificed for success. On impulse, he called his COO. "Mark, I need a favor. Can you handle things for a couple of weeks? I'm taking some personal time." Mark's surprise was evident even over the phone. In 5 years, James had never taken more than a long weekend off. "Everything okay, boss?" "Not really," James answered honestly. "But I'm hoping it will be. I just need some time to get my head straight." After hanging up, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in years, he didn't have a plan, a schedule, a goal to achieve. He was giving himself permission to simply be, to reflect, to find his way back to the person he had lost somewhere along the way to success. As he left the coffee shop, he passed a community center with a sign advertising free art classes for children. Without overthinking it, he went inside and asked how he could help. The woman at the front desk looked surprised at his offer but handed him a volunteer form. "We always need more hands," she said. "Especially male role models for the kids." James filled out the form, writing down his personal email rather than his business one. When he came to the line asking for his occupation, he hesitated before simply writing volunteer. For the next 2 weeks, James divided his time between helping with children's art classes, visiting the small apartment he and Rachel had once shared, now occupied by a young couple who kindly let him look around when he explained his connection to the place, and long walks through the city he had once known intimately but had viewed only from his car window or high-rise office for years. He left his luxury car in the garage, taking public transportation instead. He ate at the small neighborhood restaurants he had once frequented, reconnecting with owners who remembered him from before. He even visited the bank where he had applied for his first business loan, the one that had been rejected, sending him into the spiral of debt and fear that had ultimately led to his leaving Rachel. The manager who had denied his loan was still there, though now with gray hair and reading glasses. James introduced himself, not as the CEO of a successful tech company, but simply as James, a former applicant. "I remember you," the manager said, surprising him. "You had that app idea, the one for connecting local artisans with buyers." "You turned me down," James reminded him, no bitterness in his voice. "Best thing I ever did for you looks like," the manager replied with a knowing smile. "Saw your face in the business section last year. Seems like rejection worked out well for you." James considered this. In some ways, not in others. As he was leaving the bank, his phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. "Hello? James? It's Rachel." Her voice sent his heart racing. "The gallery is hosting a special event tonight for the artists in our maternal health initiative. I thought you might want to come. See what it's all about." He was so surprised by the invitation that it took him a moment to respond. "I'd like that. What time?" 7. "It's casual, just a small gathering." "I'll be there," he promised. That evening, as he approached the gallery, James felt nervous in a way he hadn't experienced in years, not the high-stakes tension of business deals, but the simple human anxiety of wanting to make a good impression. He had deliberately dressed down in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, leaving behind his executive persona. The gallery was transformed for the event, with the artwork rearranged to create an intimate gathering space. A small group of people mingled, examining the art and engaging in animated conversations. James spotted Rachel immediately, her pregnant form even more pronounced than before, radiant as she spoke with a young woman whose photography was featured prominently. When she saw him, she smiled and waved him over. "James, this is Tanya, one of our resident artists. She's been documenting her journey as a first-time mother through her photography." James shook Tanya's hand. "Your work is incredible. The way you capture the range of emotions, it's powerful." Tanya beamed. "Thank you. It's not always easy being both the subject and the artist, but this gallery has given me the space to explore that duality." As the evening progressed, James found himself drawn into conversations about art, community, and the gallery's mission to make creative expression accessible to everyone. He met teachers, healthcare workers, artists, and activists, all part of the support network Rachel had mentioned. This was the family she had chosen, the community she had built while he had been focused on climbing corporate ladders and accumulating wealth. Near the end of the event, Rachel found him examining a series of photographs depicting pregnant women from different cultural backgrounds. "What do you think?" she asked, standing beside him. "It's beautiful," he said honestly. "All of it, the art, the community you've created here. It's real in a way that..." He trailed off, not wanting to diminish her accomplishment by comparing it to his own hollow success. Rachel seemed to understand anyway. In a way that corporate success often isn't. He nodded, grateful for her insight. "Exactly. These past 2 weeks, I've been rediscovering the parts of myself I left behind when I walked away from our life together. I've been volunteering at a community center, teaching kids about basic business concepts through art projects." Rachel's eyes widened in surprise. "You? Teaching children?" He laughed, the sound unexpectedly light. "I know it shocked me too. But it turns out I'm not bad at it. The kids don't care about my title or my bank account, they just want someone to listen to their ideas and take them seriously." "That sounds like the James the first used to know," Rachel said softly. "The one who got excited about helping local artisans connect with customers, who spent weekends at craft fairs talking to small business owners about their dreams." Her words touched something deep inside him, recognition of the self he had lost along the way. "I miss being that person," he admitted. "I've achieved everything I thought I wanted, but somewhere along the way I lost sight of why I wanted it in the first place." Rachel rested a hand on her belly as the baby kicked. "It's never too late to find your way back to yourself, James." As guests began to leave, Rachel introduced him to an older woman who gave him a warm hug. "So you're the famous James. Rachel's told me all about your volunteer work with the children." James shot Rachel a confused look. He had only mentioned his volunteering tonight. After the woman moved on, Rachel smiled at his bewilderment. "I've been keeping tabs on you. The community center director is a friend of mine. She told me about the successful businessman who showed up out of the blue to teach art and business skills to kids. You knew I was volunteering there? Why didn't you say something when I mentioned it?" Rachel shrugged. "I wanted to hear how you felt about it, not how you thought I wanted you to feel. Besides, it was interesting to hear about you from someone who had no idea about our history." As they cleaned up after the event, working side by side in comfortable silence, James felt more at peace than he had in years. This wasn't about rekindling their relationship or trying to undo the past. It was about rediscovering the person he had been meant to be all along. Someone who valued connection and community alongside success. When everything was tidied away, they stood together at the gallery entrance. "Thank you for inviting me tonight," James said. "It meant a lot." Rachel smiled, tired but content. "You fit in well here. These people don't care about stock options or executive titles. They care about what you contribute, who you are beneath the surface." As he walked her to her apartment upstairs, James realized that for the first time since seeing her at the restaurant, he wasn't consumed by regret or guilt. Instead, he felt something new stirring inside him. Hope, possibility, and the sense that perhaps his journey had been leading him back here all along, not to reclaim what was lost, but to discover what might still be possible. The board members exchanged nervous glances as James finished outlining his proposal. In the gleaming conference room of his company headquarters, he had just suggested something none of them had expected: a complete restructuring of the company's community engagement strategy, with a significant portion of profits directed toward supporting local arts and education initiatives. "Let me get this straight," said Richard, the most conservative of his investors. "You want to divert 20% of our profits to community programs? After we just had our most profitable quarter ever?" James nodded, calm and certain in a way he hadn't felt in years. "That's right. And I want to establish a foundation specifically focused on supporting local artisans and small business entrepreneurs who can't get traditional bank funding." "May I ask what prompted this sudden interest in philanthropy?" another board member asked, barely concealing her skepticism. James smiled. "It's not sudden. It's actually a return to the original vision I had for this company before we got caught up in growth metrics and profit margins. We've achieved financial success. Now it's time to create meaningful impact." By the end of the meeting, James had secured reluctant approval for a scaled-back version of his proposal, a 10% profit allocation to start, with the possibility of increasing based on program results. It wasn't everything he had hoped for, but it was a beginning. As the board members filed out, his COO Mark lingered behind. "Something's changed with you," he observed. "These past few weeks since you took that personal time, you're different." James considered this. "Not different," he corrected. "More like, I've remembered who I was supposed to be all along." Over the next month, James threw himself into establishing the foundation while still running his company. He rented a modest apartment closer to the city center, keeping his penthouse but finding he preferred the warmth and character of the smaller space. His days were split between corporate responsibilities and visits to community centers, schools, and small business incubators. He saw Rachel occasionally, bumping into her at local arts events or stopping by the gallery to see new exhibitions. Their interactions were friendly but cautious, two people with a complicated history finding a new way to exist in each other's lives. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, James was leaving a meeting with a group of high school students he was mentoring when his phone rang. It was Rachel, her voice tight with tension. "James? I hate to ask, but I'm at the hospital for my checkup and my car won't start. My usual ride is out of town and with this rain I can't seem to get a taxi. Would you mind?" "I'll be there in 15 minutes, he said without hesitation, already changing direction toward the hospital. When he pulled up, Rachel was waiting under the shelter of the entrance, one hand supporting her lower back, her face drawn with fatigue. She smiled gratefully as he hopped out to open the passenger door for her. "Thank you for this," she said as she settled into the seat. "I wouldn't have called, but—" "I'm glad you did," James interrupted gently. "That's what friends are for, right?" The word hung between them. Friends. Was that what they were now? The label felt both insufficient and meaningful. "Everything okay with the checkup?" he asked as he navigated through the rainy streets. Rachel nodded. "Just routine. Though she's getting big." She placed a hand on her stomach. "The doctor says she's running out of room in there." James smiled. "She's going to be tall like her mom." "Maybe." Rachel looked out at the rain-slicked streets. "Listen, would you mind stopping by the grocery store on the way? I was planning to do that after my appointment." "Of course." At the store, James insisted on pushing the cart while Rachel selected what she needed. There was something oddly comfortable about the domestic scene. Picking out fruit, debating bread options, adding items to the cart in a synchronized dance they had performed countless times during their marriage. An elderly woman smiled at them in the produce section. "You two make such a lovely couple. When are you due, dear?" Before either of them could correct her, the woman continued, "My Arthur was just like your husband there, so attentive during my pregnancies. That's how you know you've got a good one." She patted James on the arm and moved on, leaving them in awkward silence. Rachel laughed softly. "That happens more than you'd think." "I don't mind," James replied, surprising himself with the honesty in his voice. As they checked out, the domesticity of the moment struck him again. Rachel sorting the groceries on the conveyor belt while he bagged them, the casual way they moved around each other, anticipating the other's needs without words. It felt natural in a way that his polished dates with Olivia never had. Back at Rachel's apartment, James insisted on carrying the groceries up the stairs despite her protests that she wasn't an invalid. "The doctor said you should take it easy," he reminded her. "She said I should avoid stress, not groceries," Rachel countered, but she let him help anyway. Inside her apartment, James was again struck by how much the space reflected her. Warm colors, art everywhere, books stacked on every surface, and now, a small nursery taking shape in what had once been a spare room. It was modest but vibrant with life and creativity. "Thanks for the ride," Rachel said, clearly expecting him to leave now that his duty was done. "Let me put these away for you," he offered instead, already unpacking the groceries with the familiarity of someone who once knew where everything belonged. Rachel watched him for a moment, then shrugged. "All right. I'm going to change into something dry." While she was gone, James found himself moving through her kitchen with ease, remembering which cabinets held which items. On impulse, he pulled out ingredients to make the ginger tea she had always loved when she wasn't feeling well. When Rachel returned in comfortable clothes, she raised an eyebrow at the steaming mug he offered. "You remembered. Some things you don't forget," he said simply. They sat at her small kitchen table, the rain pattering against the windows creating a cozy backdrop to their quiet conversation. James told her about his foundation plans, and Rachel shared stories about the young artists she was mentoring. "I should go," James said finally, noticing the time. "You need rest." At the door, Rachel hesitated. "James, thank you. Not just for today but for finding your way back to who you used to be." Her words stayed with him long after he left, echoing in his mind as he drove through the rain-washed streets. Finding his way back. Was that what he was doing? Or was he finding his way forward to something new? The following Sunday, James was surprised by a text from Rachel inviting him to a community mural project she was overseeing. The kids from your business class are participating. Thought you might want to see them in action. He found himself smiling as he texted back his acceptance. The project was taking place at a previously neglected wall in a park near the community center. When James arrived, children and adults were already at work, transforming the blank concrete into a vibrant celebration of community. He spotted several of his students and waved, pleased when they eagerly called him over to see their contributions. Rachel was directing the overall effort, her pregnant form moving gracefully among the painters, offering encouragement and guidance. When she spotted James, she smiled and waved him over. What do you think? She asked, gesturing to the emerging mural. It's incredible, he said sincerely. How did you get permission for this? Rachel grinned. I have my connections. The parks department has been trying to reduce graffiti here for years. I convinced them that involving the community in creating something beautiful would give people ownership of the space. James nodded, impressed by her practical approach to combining art and community problem solving. It was so like her to see beyond the aesthetic to the human impact. Can I help? He asked, rolling up his sleeves. Rachel handed him a brush. That section needs some blue. Think you can handle it, Mr. CEO? I'll do my best, he replied with a mock salute. For the next few hours, James lost himself in the simple joy of creating alongside others. He painted alongside kids from his class, learning about their lives outside the community center. He chatted with local residents who stopped by to watch or contribute. And always he was aware of Rachel moving through the crowd, her presence a centering force in the joyful chaos. When the work was done for the day, everyone gathered for a community potluck picnic. James found himself seated on a blanket with Rachel and several of the children, sharing food and stories as the sun began to set. You're good with them, Rachel observed as the kids ran off to play after eating. The children. They respond to you. James watched the kids chasing each other across the grass. They're amazing. So full of ideas and energy. I never realized how much I'd enjoyed teaching. You always did, Rachel said quietly. Remember when we used to talk about having kids? You were always so excited about teaching them things, showing them how the world works. The reminder of their shared dreams brought a familiar ache, but now it was tinged with something else. A recognition that some dreams don't die, they just transform. As they packed up to leave, one of James's students, a bright-eyed girl named Zoe, ran up to them. Mr. James. Ms. Rachel. I drew this for the baby. She thrust a colorful drawing into Rachel's hands, a picture of what appeared to be two adults and a small child, surrounded by swirls of color. Rachel examined it with genuine appreciation. It's beautiful, Zoe. Thank you. After Zoe ran back to her mother, Rachel showed the drawing to James. She's drawn us as a family, she said softly. James looked at the childish rendering, the tall figure labeled Mr. James, the round-bellied figure labeled Ms. Rachel, and the tiny figure between them labeled simply Baby. Kids see things simply, he said, not sure how else to respond. Sometimes simple is true, Rachel replied, carefully tucking the drawing into her bag. That night, alone in his apartment, James found himself thinking about the drawing, about the day spent creating something beautiful with Rachel and the community, about the easy comfort of their shared history and the tentative new connection forming between them. He realized with sudden clarity that he had been given a rare gift, the chance to rediscover not just himself, but a connection he had thought was lost forever. Not as it had been, but as something new that honored the past while creating space for growth. The next morning he called his real estate agent. I've decided to sell the penthouse, he said. Are you sure? The agent asked, surprised. Property values in that building are only going up. I'm sure, James replied, looking around at the sleek, impersonal space that had never felt like home. It's time for a change. James was reviewing applications for his foundation's first round of grants when his assistant buzzed through on the intercom. Sir, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's rather insistent. Before he could respond, the door to his office swung open and Olivia strode in, looking as polished and beautiful as ever, but with a hardness in her eyes he had never seen before. Olivia, he said, rising from his desk in surprise. I wasn't expecting you. Clearly, she replied, setting her designer handbag on his desk with deliberate care. You haven't returned my calls. It was true. After their conversation in his penthouse, he had sent her a brief message thanking her for her understanding, but had otherwise kept his distance, assuming their relationship was over. Apparently she felt differently. "I thought we had said everything that needed saying," he said carefully. Olivia gave a short, humorless laugh. "Did we? Because I thought we were taking a break while you sorted out your feelings about seeing your ex-wife again. I didn't realize you were diving headfirst into playing house with her." James frowned. "What are you talking about?" Olivia pulled out her phone and showed him a photo, James and Rachel at the grocery store, his hand resting protectively near her lower back as he reached for something on a high shelf. The picture had clearly been taken without their knowledge. "Where did you get this?" he asked, unnerved by the invasion of privacy. "Does it matter? It's all over the business gossip sites. Tech CEO reconnects with pregnant ex-wife. Some are even speculating that the baby is yours." Olivia's voice was calm but razor-sharp. "Is it?" "No," James said firmly. "Rachel and I have been separated for 5 years. The baby isn't mine." "But you wish it was, don't you?" Olivia pressed, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against his desk. "You wish you had never left her." James took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "What Rachel and I had was complicated. What happened between us was my fault. Seeing her again has made me reconsider a lot of things about my life, including what kind of person I want to be. And that person doesn't include me," Olivia finished for him, her voice finally betraying a hint of hurt beneath the anger. By the end of the meeting, James had maintained his position but agreed to be more careful about his public appearances while the gossip died down. It wasn't ideal, but it was a compromise he could live with, for now. As the board members filed out, Richard lingered behind. "For what it's worth," he said gruffly, "I respect a man who can admit when he's been running. Just make sure you're running towards something this time, not just away from your guilt." The words struck James with unexpected force. Was that what he was doing? Using Rachel and the baby and his newfound interest in community work as a way to assuage his guilt rather than truly starting fresh? He spent the next week buried in work, respecting Rachel's request for distance while battling his own doubts. He threw himself into foundation preparations, reviewed company strategies with renewed focus, and even agreed to a carefully orchestrated interview with a business publication to address the rumors without directly discussing Rachel. "My personal life is private," he told the interviewers smoothly. "But I can say that this company's commitment to community impact is sincere and long-term. It's part of our evolution as an organization that wants to do well by doing good." The article was positive, focusing on the foundation and James's vision for ethical business practices rather than the gossip. He sent Rachel a link when it published, the first contact they'd had in days. Her response was brief but warm. "Well said. Hope you're doing okay." It wasn't much, but it was something. An acknowledgement that she was still thinking about him, still cared about his well-being despite the complications his presence in her life had created. James was reviewing the final paperwork for the sale of his penthouse when his phone rang. It was after midnight, and seeing Rachel's name on the screen sent a jolt of alarm through him. "Rachel? Is everything okay?" Her voice was tight with pain. "James, I'm sorry to call so late. I think something's wrong with the baby. I'm having contractions, but it's too early. I called an ambulance, but it's going to be at least 20 minutes and I'm scared." "I'm on my way," he said, already grabbing his keys. "Stay on the phone with me." He drove through the dark city streets with his heart pounding, keeping Rachel talking as he navigated the quickest route to her apartment. She was trying to stay calm, but he could hear the fear in her voice. "It's too early," she kept saying. "She's not ready yet." "Everything's going to be okay," James promised, though he had no right or way to ensure that. "Just breathe. I'm almost there." When he reached her building, he took the stairs 2 at a time. Rachel opened the door at his knock, her face pale with pain, one hand clutching her belly. "The ambulance should be here soon," he said, helping her to the couch. "What can I do?" "Just stay with me," she whispered, gripping his hand as another contraction hit. "I'm scared, James." He held her hand tightly, wishing he could take her pain, her fear. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise." When the ambulance finally arrived, James rode with her to the hospital, never letting go of her hand. In the emergency room, doctors quickly confirmed that Rachel was in premature labor. They administered medications to try to stop the contractions and prepared for all possibilities. "The baby is showing signs of distress," a doctor explained gently. "We're going to do everything we can to delay delivery and give her lungs more time to develop, but you should be prepared that she might need to be delivered soon." Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face. When the doctor left, she turned to James. "I can't lose her," she whispered. "I can't." "You won't," James said firmly. You're both fighters. And I'm right here with you for as long as you want me. As the night wore on, the medication slowly began to take effect. By morning, the contractions had subsided, though Rachel was kept for observation. James never left her side, sleeping awkwardly in a chair beside her bed, holding her hand whenever she woke disoriented and afraid. On the second day, when it seemed the immediate crisis had passed, Rachel looked at him with tired eyes. You didn't have to stay. Yes, I did, he replied simply. She studied his face, taking in the stubble and dark circles under his eyes. Why? It was a simple question that demanded an honest answer. James took a deep breath. Because 5 years ago, I walked away when things got hard. I told myself it was for your benefit, but really I was just scared. I'm not making that mistake again. I'm not leaving unless you tell me to go. Rachel was quiet for a long moment, her hand resting protectively over her belly. I was so angry with you for so long, she finally said. When you left, it wasn't just the marriage that ended. It was all our plans, all our dreams. I had to rebuild everything from scratch. I know, James said softly, and I can never make up for that. But, Rachel continued, watching you these past weeks, volunteering with the children, creating the foundation, even standing up to your board, I've seen glimpses of the man I always believed you could be. The man who faces challenges instead of running from them. Hope flared in James's chest, bright and fragile. I want to be that man, he said. Not just for you or for the baby, but for myself. Because it's who I should have been all along. Rachel squeezed his hand. I'm not making any promises, James. We both need time. But I'm not closing the door either. It wasn't everything, but it was more than he deserved. A chance to prove himself, to show her that he had truly changed, that he wouldn't run when things got difficult. As Rachel drifted off to sleep, James sat watching over her, a profound sense of peace settling over him despite the uncomfortable chair and hospital surroundings. Whatever happened between them, whether they found their way back to each other or forged a new kind of relationship entirely, he was exactly where he needed to be. 2 months after the premature labor scare, Rachel stood in the nursery of her apartment, arranging tiny clothes in the dresser drawer. The close call had shaken her deeply, but both she and the baby had stabilized. Now, with just a few weeks left until her due date, she was preparing for her daughter's arrival with a mixture of excitement and nerves. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find James standing there, holding a large, flat package wrapped in brown paper. Special delivery, he said with a smile. May I come in? Rachel stepped back to let him enter, curious about the package. What's that? A nursery warming gift, James replied. I thought the room could use some art. Since the hospital scare, their relationship had cautiously warmed. James had respected her need for space while making it clear he wanted to be part of her life in whatever way she was comfortable with. He had continued his community work, established the foundation, and even moved into a modest apartment in a neighborhood not far from hers. The tabloid interest had eventually died down, just as Rachel had predicted, allowing them to rebuild their connection away from public scrutiny. Can I open it now? Rachel asked, genuinely touched by the gesture. Please do. She carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a beautiful painting, a night sky filled with stars over a cityscape, with a crescent moon casting a gentle light. The style was dreamlike and soothing, perfect for a nursery. James, it's beautiful, she breathed, running her fingers lightly over the canvas. It's by one of the teenage artists from the community center, he explained. She's incredibly talented but has never sold a piece before. This is her first commissioned work. Rachel felt tears spring to her eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gift. Not just the painting itself, but the way James had used the opportunity to support a young artist. It's perfect, she said. Can you help me hang it? Together, they positioned the painting on the wall above the crib. Stepping back to admire it, they stood side by side, shoulders almost touching. How are you feeling? James asked, his voice gentle. Huge, Rachel replied with a small laugh. Impatient. Ready to meet her. She rested a hand on her belly. But also scared. That's understandable, James said. But you won't be alone, Rachel. You have your friends, the gallery community, the doctors. And me if you want me here. Rachel turned to look at him, really look at him. The man standing beside her was both familiar and new, the James she had married, but tempered by experience and growth. The eyes that had once avoided difficult truths now met hers directly, honest and open. I do want you here, she admitted. Not because I need you, but because I think we both deserve a second chance to get things right. James's expression softened. That's all I want, A chance to show you who I am now, who we might be together. No promises yet, Rachel cautioned, though her voice was warm. Let's just see where this goes, one day at a time. One day at a time, James agreed. I can work with that. As he prepared to leave, Rachel walked him to the door. The foundation launch is next week, right? James nodded. Will you come? It would mean a lot to have you there. I wouldn't miss it, Rachel promised. After he left, Rachel returned to the nursery, looking up at the starlit painting. One day at a time. It was a philosophy she had adopted after James left her, when the future she had planned disappeared overnight. Back then, it had been a survival strategy, focusing on getting through just one day then another until eventually she had built a new life for herself. Now it felt like something else, not a way to endure pain but a way to savor each moment as it came, to allow something new to unfold gradually without forcing or rushing it. One day at a time she was finding her way back to trust, not just in James, but in the possibility of happiness she had once thought was lost forever. The foundation launch event was held at a renovated warehouse space that had been transformed into a showcase for local artists and entrepreneurs. James had been working on the details for months, and as Rachel entered the crowded space, she could see his vision come to life. The walls displayed artwork from community programs alongside business plans and prototypes from aspiring entrepreneurs. Local food vendors served appetizers, musicians performed in the corners, and everywhere, people from different walks of life mingled and connected. Rachel spotted James in the center of the room, deep in conversation with an elderly man who was gesturing enthusiastically toward a display of handcrafted wooden toys. James was listening intently, his focus completely on the man rather than on the corporate executives and media representatives who hovered nearby, waiting for his attention. When he saw Rachel, his face lit up. He excused himself from the conversation and made his way through the crowd to her side. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely relieved. Rachel smiled. "I said I would." She looked around the vibrant space. "This is amazing, James. You've created something special here." "We've only just begun," he replied. "The foundation will provide grants, mentorship, workspace, whatever these artists and entrepreneurs need to bring their visions to life." His eyes shone with passion and purpose. "It's what I always wanted to do before I got sidetracked by chasing success for its own sake." "I remember," Rachel said softly. "You used to talk about creating opportunities for people who just needed a chance to prove themselves." "Yes," James acknowledged, touched that she remembered. "It just took me a while to find my way back to that purpose." "Better late than never," Rachel offered, and they shared a smile that acknowledged how those words might apply to more than just his business vision. As the evening progressed, Rachel observed James from a distance, how he made sure to speak with every artist and entrepreneur in the room, how he connected people who might benefit from knowing each other, how he deflected praise for himself and redirected attention to the community members the foundation was designed to support. This was the man she had always believed he could be, confident without being arrogant, successful without being selfish, focused on lifting others up rather than climbing over them. When it came time for his speech, James kept it brief and heartfelt. "This foundation isn't about philanthropy as an afterthought to success," he told the crowd. "It's about redefining what success means in the first place. True success isn't measured by what we accumulate for ourselves, but by what we create together and the opportunities we open for others." His eyes found Rachel's in the crowd as he concluded. "Sometimes the best way forward is to remember why we started the journey in the first place, and to have the courage to return to our true path, even if that means admitting we got lost along the way." After the speeches, as the evening wound down, James found Rachel sitting in a quiet corner, resting her feet and watching the remaining guests. "How are you holding up?" he asked, concern in his voice. "You should be resting, not standing at events." Rachel smiled. "I'm fine. The baby and I wanted to be here for your big night." James sat beside her, their shoulders touching lightly. "It means everything that you came." "I've been thinking," Rachel said after a moment, "about what you said in your speech about finding your way back to your true path." James turned to look at her, waiting for her to continue. "I think that's what we've both been doing these past months," she said thoughtfully. "Finding our way back to who we were meant to be, not to erase the time apart or pretend the hurt never happened, but to learn from it, to grow through it." "I wish I could undo the pain I caused you," James said quietly. Rachel shook her head. "If you hadn't left, if we hadn't gone through everything we did separately, we wouldn't be who we are now. I needed to discover my own strength. You needed to learn what really matters. Maybe we both needed to lose each other to find ourselves." James considered this. "And now, where does that leave us?" Rachel placed her hand over his. In a new place. Not where we were before, but somewhere with more truth between us. Somewhere we can build something real if that's what we both want. It's what I want, James said without hesitation. More than anything. Before Rachel could respond, she gasped, her hand flying to her belly. What is it? James asked, alarmed. Is it the baby? Rachel took his hand and placed it on her belly just in time to feel a strong kick. She's dancing, Rachel laughed. I think she approves of the plan. James's face softened with wonder as he felt the baby move. Hello there, little one, he whispered. The moment was interrupted by one of the foundation staff members approaching with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. CEO, but the mayor is leaving and would like to speak with you before she goes. James looked torn, his hand still resting on Rachel's belly. Go, Rachel urged. This is your night. I'll be fine. I'll be right back, he promised, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead before reluctantly moving away. Rachel watched him go, her hand resting where his had been moments before. She had spent so long being strong on her own, building a life without him, that the idea of letting him back in, not just as a friend or co-parent but as something more, still frightened her. But the man she had seen tonight wasn't the one who had walked away when things got tough. This James faced challenges head-on, put others before himself, and wasn't afraid to be vulnerable. He had fought for his vision of the foundation despite board resistance, had shown up consistently for her and the baby even when the path wasn't clear, had rebuilt himself into someone she could trust again. One day at a time, he was proving that people could change, that second chances could lead to something even better than what was lost. As promised, James returned to her side as soon as he could break away from the mayor. Ready to go home? He asked. I'll drive you. Home. The word hung between them, full of meaning and possibility. Yes, Rachel said, taking his offered hand. Let's go home. The call came at 3:17 a.m., jolting James from a restless sleep. He fumbled for his phone, immediately alert when he saw Rachel's name on the screen. James? Her voice was tight with pain. It's time. My water broke. I'm on my way, he said, already pulling on clothes with the phone wedged between his ear and shoulder. How far apart are the contractions? About 7 minutes, Rachel replied. But getting stronger. The doctor says to come in now. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Just breathe, okay? Everything's going to be fine. James drove through the quiet pre-dawn streets with focused intensity. In the weeks since the foundation launch, he and Rachel had grown closer, carefully rebuilding trust between them. They hadn't defined their relationship beyond acknowledging they wanted to be in each other's lives, but James had made sure Rachel knew he was there for her in every way possible. When he reached her apartment, he found her sitting on the edge of the sofa, a small packed bag beside her, breathing through a contraction. You're here, she said when it passed, relief evident in her voice. Of course I'm here, James replied, helping her to her feet. Ready to go meet your daughter? Rachel nodded, gripping his hand tightly as another contraction began to build. Our daughter, she corrected him softly when it passed. James froze, staring at her in shock. Rachel, what? Not biologically, she clarified quickly, but in all the ways that matter, if you want that. Emotion welled up in James's throat, making it difficult to speak. I want that more than anything, he managed finally. Good, Rachel said, attempting a smile that turned into a grimace as another contraction hit. Because I think she's in a hurry to get here. At the hospital, events moved quickly. Rachel was immediately taken to the delivery room, her labor progressing faster than expected. James stayed by her side, holding her hand through contractions, wiping sweat from her brow, and offering water between the waves of pain. You're doing great, he encouraged as she gripped his hand with surprising strength. Just breathe. Easy for you to say, Rachel gasped, but there was no anger in her voice, just the raw honesty of a woman in labor. The doctor checked her progress and nodded. We're almost there. You'll be pushing soon. Rachel's eyes found James's, suddenly filled with fear. I can't do this, she whispered. James leaned close, his forehead touching hers. Yes, you can. You're the strongest person I know, Rachel. You rebuilt your life when I walked away. You created a community that lifts people up. You've carried this baby through every challenge. You can do this too, and I'm right here with you. Something in his words seemed to steady her. She nodded, took a deep breath, and when the next contraction came, she channeled her strength into bringing their daughter into the world. The next hour was a blur of focused effort, pain, encouragement, and finally, the most beautiful sound James had ever heard, the first cry of a newborn baby girl. She's here, the doctor announced, lifting the tiny, squirming infant for them to see. And she's perfect. Tears streamed down Rachel's face as the nurses placed the baby on her chest. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." James stood beside them, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't begin to name. This child wasn't his by blood, but in that moment, as she blinked up at the world for the first time, he felt a connection so profound it took his breath away. "Would you like to cut the cord?" the doctor asked, offering him the scissors. James looked to Rachel, who nodded encouragingly. With trembling hands, he cut the physical connection between mother and child, even as he felt a new kind of connection forming between all three of them. Later, in the recovery room, James sat beside Rachel's bed while she dozed, the baby sleeping peacefully in a bassinet nearby. He couldn't take his eyes off the tiny human who had entered their lives just hours ago, changing everything. The baby stirred, her face scrunching up as she began to fuss. Not wanting to wake Rachel, James carefully lifted the newborn, cradling her against his chest with a natural instinct that surprised him. "Shoo," he soothed, gently swaying. "Your mom needs her rest." The baby quieted, seemingly content in his arms. James studied her tiny features, the delicate eyebrows, the perfect miniature nose, the rosebud mouth. She was beautiful, a miracle. "I know I'm not your biological father," he whispered to her, "but I promise to love you like my own. I promise to be there for every milestone, every challenge, every joy. I won't walk away this time." Rachel's voice, soft but clear, came from the bed. "I believe you." James looked up to find her watching them, her eyes filled with a mixture of tenderness and something that looked a lot like love. "Did I wake you?" he asked. She shook her head. "I was just resting my eyes." She held out her arms for the baby, and James carefully transferred the precious bundle. "She likes you." "The feeling is mutual," James replied, sitting on the edge of the bed so they could both gaze at the infant. "I've been thinking about names," Rachel said after a moment. "I thought you had decided on Lily," James said. It was the name Rachel had mentioned most often during her pregnancy. "I had," she admitted. But now, looking at her, she traced a gentle finger over the baby's cheek. "I think I want to call her Hope." James felt the significance of the name wash over him. Hope, what had sustained them through separation, what had brought them back together, what this tiny life represented for their future. "Hope," he repeated softly. "It's perfect." Rachel's eyes met his over their daughter's head. "Second chances don't come along often, James. I spent so much time being angry with you for leaving, but now I'm just grateful that you found your way back." "I should have never left in the first place," James said, regret coloring his voice. "Maybe," Rachel acknowledged. "But if you hadn't, would we be the people we are now? Would you have found your true purpose with the foundation? Would I have discovered my strength in building the gallery community? Would we appreciate what we have now if we hadn't lost it once?" James considered her words. "You're saying everything happened the way it was supposed to. I'm saying life rarely gives us what we expect, but sometimes it gives us what we need." Rachel looked down at Hope, who had fallen back asleep in her arms. "She wasn't in my plans. Neither was seeing you again. But here we are." "Here we are," James echoed, his hand finding Rachel's. "And I'm never leaving again." Rachel intertwined her fingers with his. "I know." As the first light of dawn filtered through the hospital window, casting a golden glow over the three of them, James felt a sense of rightness settle in his chest. This was where he belonged, not in a sterile penthouse surrounded by the trappings of hollow success, but here, with the woman he had never stopped loving and the child they would raise together. In Hope's peaceful face, he saw the future, not the one he had once run from, but the one he had finally found the courage to embrace. 2 weeks after Hope's birth, James stood in the doorway of Rachel's apartment, his arms loaded with groceries, watching as she gently rocked their daughter to sleep. The scene filled him with a contentment he had never known in all his years chasing success. "She finally went down?" he whispered, stepping inside and closing the door quietly behind him. Rachel nodded, carefully placing Hope in her bassinet. "For now. But you know the drill, we have about an hour before she's hungry again." James smiled, setting the groceries on the kitchen counter. "Then let's make the most of it. I brought ingredients to cook dinner." "You're going to cook?" Rachel raised an eyebrow in amusement. "Since when do you cook?" "Since I took some basic cooking classes last month," James admitted. "I figured it might come in handy with a newborn in the mix." Rachel looked genuinely touched by his thoughtfulness. "You've been full of surprises lately." It was true. In the 2 weeks since Hope's birth, James had thrown himself into supporting Rachel and bonding with their daughter with the same focus and determination he had once reserved for building his company. He arranged his work schedule to be present as much as possible, learning to change diapers, prepare bottles of pumped milk, and soothe the baby's cries with a natural ease that surprised them both. As James began preparing a simple but nutritious meal, Rachel settled at the kitchen table, watching him work. "How was the foundation meeting today?" she asked. "Productive," James replied, chopping vegetables with newfound skill. "We finalized the first round of grants. 10 local artists and 15 small business entrepreneurs will be receiving funding next month. The mentorship program starts next week." "That's fantastic," Rachel said. "The gallery wants to partner on the next exhibition. We can showcase the artists who received grants." James smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. Community building is stronger when we work together." Their conversation flowed easily as he cooked and she set the table, discussing their work, the foundation, Hope's latest developments, and the countless small details that made up their evolving life together. They had fallen into a comfortable routine these past 2 weeks, with James spending most of his time at Rachel's apartment while maintaining his own place nearby. Neither had explicitly discussed more permanent arrangements, but James was beginning to think about the future in ways he hadn't allowed himself before. As they ate dinner, Rachel looked up at him with a sudden seriousness. "There's something we need to talk about." James felt a flutter of anxiety. "What is it?" "Hope's birth certificate," Rachel said. "I left the father's section blank for now, but I've been thinking. I want your name there, James. Legally, officially." James set down his fork, stunned by the offer. "Rachel, are you sure? That's a big step." She nodded. "I'm sure. Hope may not be yours biologically, but you're her father in every way that matters. You've been here from the moment she was born, and I know you'll be here for her always." "I will," James promised. "But what about Hope's biological father? Should he have a say in this?" Rachel's expression was calm but firm. "Hope was conceived through a donor. There is no other father, James. Just an anonymous donor who helped me create her. I chose to become a mother on my own terms, but now I want us to be a family. The 3 of us." James reached across the table to take her hand, emotion making it difficult to speak. "Nothing would make me prouder than to be Hope's father, legally, officially, and in every other way possible." Rachel squeezed his hand. "Good. Because there's something else I want to discuss." "What's that?" "Living arrangements," she said. "As wonderful as it's been having you here most of the time, this apartment is getting crowded with all of us and your things spread between 2 places. I think we should consider finding a home together. Something that's ours, not just mine that you've moved into or yours that I've adjusted to." James felt his heart expand with joy at her words. She wasn't just offering him a place in Hope's life, but a true partnership, a fresh start for all of them. "I think that's a wonderful idea," he said. "Actually, I've been looking at houses in that neighborhood near the park, the one with the good schools and within walking distance of the gallery." Rachel's eyes widened. "You've been house hunting?" James smiled sheepishly. "Just casually browsing. I didn't want to pressure you, but I've been hoping we might be ready for a step like this." "Show me what you've found," Rachel said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Over the next few weeks, as they settled into life with Hope, they also began the search for their family home. Each property they visited helped them clarify what they wanted. A space with character rather than flashy modern design, room for Hope to grow, a studio where Rachel could work when she wasn't at the gallery, and an office for James that kept him connected to his company without consuming their home life. They finally found it in a charming older house with a garden and plenty of natural light. It needed some renovation, but both saw that as an opportunity to create something that truly reflected their values and vision for their future together. "What do you think?" James asked as they stood in what would be Hope's room, the baby asleep in her carrier. Rachel looked around the space, then out the window to the maple tree that would shade the room in summer and filter beautiful light in winter. "It feels right," she said simply. "Like home." The day they closed on the house, James surprised Rachel by suggesting they walk through it before the moving trucks arrived with their belongings. He seemed uncharacteristically nervous as he unlocked the front door. "I want to show you something," he said, leading her through the empty rooms to the backyard garden. There, in the dappled shade of an old oak tree, he had set up a small table with champagne, sparkling water for Rachel who was still nursing, and a small box. "James, what is all this?" Rachel asked, surprised. He took her hands in his expression serious yet full of love. 5 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life by walking away when things got tough. I convinced myself I was doing what was best for you, but really I was just running from my own fears. Rachel started to speak, but he gently pressed on. Please let me finish. These past months, finding my way back to you, watching you create a new life, both figuratively and literally, he smiled down at Hope sleeping in her carrier, has shown me what true courage looks like. You faced your challenges head on. You built something beautiful from the broken pieces. You taught me what it means to truly love someone. James reached for the small box on the table and opened it to reveal a simple but elegant ring. This isn't the same as the one I gave you before. This is new because we're new. Different people who have grown and changed and found each other again. Rachel's eyes filled with tears as James knelt before her. Rachel, I don't deserve a second chance, but if you're willing to give me one, I promise to spend every day earning it. Will you marry me? Again. Not to recapture what we had before, but to build something new and stronger. For a moment, Rachel was silent, tears streaming down her face. Then she smiled through them. The first time you proposed, you had everything planned perfectly. The fancy restaurant, the photographer to capture the moment, the speech you had practiced for weeks. James nodded, remembering his elaborate first proposal. But this, Rachel continued, gesturing to the simple setting, the empty house waiting to be filled with their life together, their daughter sleeping peacefully nearby. This is real. This is us. And yes, James. Yes, I will marry you again. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Hope stirred and began to fuss. They both laughed, breaking the solemnity of the moment. Perfect timing, Rachel said, lifting their daughter. She wanted to be part of the celebration. James wrapped his arms around both of them, feeling the completeness of the family they had created. Not through the traditional path he had once envisioned, but through a journey of separation, growth, forgiveness, and love that was all the stronger for having been tested. That night, after the moving trucks had delivered their belongings and Hope was asleep in her temporary nursery, James and Rachel sat on the floor of their new living room, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked. Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out? Rachel asked, leaning against him. If you hadn't walked away 5 years ago? If we had stayed together through the hard times? James considered the question carefully. I think about it sometimes, he admitted. But then I look at who we are now, and I'm not sure we would have become these people if we had stayed on the path we were on. What do you mean? I was so focused on proving myself, on achieving success by society's standards. Would I have ever discovered what truly mattered without losing it first? Would I have created the foundation, found meaning in helping others achieve their dreams? He looked down at her engagement ring, catching the light. Would I have learned to be the kind of man who deserves you? Rachel smiled, understanding in her eyes. And I might never have found the strength to build the gallery community, to make the choice to become a mother on my own terms. I might have continued waiting for the right time, instead of creating the right time for myself. So maybe, James said softly, everything happened exactly as it needed to for us to find our way here. Rachel nodded, snuggling closer to him. Not despite our pain, but because of it. Not by avoiding the hard parts, but by moving through them. As they sat together in their new home, surrounded by the physical representation of their fresh start, James felt profound gratitude for the journey that had led them here. The mistakes and missteps, the growth and forgiveness, the unexpected turns that had ultimately brought them exactly where they were meant to be. Outside, the first stars of evening appeared in the darkening sky, much like the painting that hung above Hope's crib, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light finds a way to shine through. The gallery was packed for the opening of Full Circle, an exhibition featuring works by recipients of the Foundation's first round of grants. Rachel moved through the crowd with practiced ease, answering questions about the artwork and introducing artists to potential buyers, while James tended to Hope, now 6 months old and fascinated by the colors and movements around her. Is that your daughter? Asked an elegantly dressed woman, smiling at Hope who was babbling happily in James's arms. She's beautiful. Yes, thank you, James replied with the easy confidence of a proud father. She's our pride and joy. The woman tilted her head, studying him. You look familiar. Haven't I seen you in the business press? James nodded. Possibly. I run a tech company, but tonight I'm just here supporting my fiancé's gallery and our foundation's artists. A CEO who's hands-on with his baby at a community art show, the woman observed with approval. Times are changing for the better. As she moved on, James caught Rachel's eye across the room. She gave him a warm smile before returning to her conversation with a group of art collectors. Watching her in her element, confident, passionate, radiating purpose, he felt a surge of pride and love. Hope squirmed in his arms, reaching toward the colorful abstract painting in front of them. You have good taste, James told her seriously. That's one of my favorites too. A familiar voice spoke behind him. She definitely has her mother's eye for art. James turned to find Olivia standing there, elegant as ever in a designer dress, her expression unreadable. Olivia, he said, surprised. I didn't expect to see you here. Clearly, she replied, her eyes moving from him to Hope and back. She looks like Rachel. James nodded, wondering why Olivia had come and what she wanted. Their last interaction had been tense, with her warning him that he was throwing away everything for a second chance that might not exist. As if reading his thoughts, Olivia smiled slightly. Don't worry, I'm not here to cause drama. I'm actually here with clients who are interested in supporting community art initiatives. She gestured toward a couple examining a sculpture nearby. When I saw this exhibition was connected to your foundation, I was curious. I'm glad you came, James said sincerely. The artists are incredible. Olivia's expression softened as she looked at Hope, who was regarding her with solemn curiosity. May I? She asked, reaching out a hand. James nodded, and Olivia gently took Hope's tiny fingers in hers. Hello there, little one, she said softly. Hope gurgled in response, then buried her face in James's shoulder, suddenly shy. She's at that age, James explained. She's lovely, Olivia said. Then meeting his eyes directly, she added, You look happy, James. Truly happy, not just successful. I am, he acknowledged. Happier than I ever thought possible. Good, Olivia said, and he was surprised to see she meant it. You know, when we broke up, I was angry. I thought you were making a mistake, trying to recapture something that was gone. But seeing you now. She glanced around the gallery, at the community gathered to celebrate art and connection, at Hope secure in his arms. This suits you far better than those stuffy investor parties ever did. Before James could respond, Rachel appeared at his side, her professional smile shifting to something more guarded when she recognized Olivia. Rachel, Olivia greeted her with surprising warmth. Congratulations on the exhibition. And on this little beauty. She nodded toward Hope. Thank you, Rachel replied, relaxing slightly. Are you enjoying the show? Very much, Olivia said. You've created something special here, both of you have. The three of them stood in a moment of awkward silence, the past hanging between them. Then Olivia smiled. My clients are signaling for me. I should go. But I wanted to say. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes what seems like bad karma is actually the universe course-correcting. I think that's what happened here. With that enigmatic statement, she rejoined her clients, leaving James and Rachel looking after her in surprise. That was unexpected, Rachel said. James shifted Hope to his other arm. She's right though. About the course correction. Rachel leaned into him slightly, creating a perfect family tableau. I think so too. Later that night, after Hope was asleep in her crib and the success of the exhibition had been quietly celebrated with a glass of wine on their back porch, James brought up Olivia's visit. It made me think about karma, he said, looking up at the starry night sky. When I left you 5 years ago, walking away from our marriage when things got tough, that created a kind of negative energy, I guess. I spent years running from it, building success that felt hollow, dating people who fit the image but not the heart. Rachel listened quietly, letting him process his thoughts. Then seeing you again, pregnant and glowing, living a life full of purpose and community, it was like karma catching up to me, showing me everything I had thrown away. And now, Rachel prompted gently. Now I feel like karma has come full circle. Not punishing me for my mistakes but giving me the chance to make things right. He reached for her hand, tracing the engagement ring on her finger. Not just with you but with myself. Finding my way back to the person I was meant to be all along. Rachel smiled in the darkness. I like that interpretation of karma. Not just, what goes around comes around in a punitive sense, but the idea that the universe keeps creating opportunities for us to heal, to grow, to become whole. Exactly, James said. Like there's a natural balance that's always seeking to restore itself, if we're wise enough to recognize it and brave enough to do the work. They sat in companionable silence, listening to the night sounds of their garden, the distant hum of the city, and the occasional rustle from the baby monitor that connected them to their sleeping daughter. We get married next month, Rachel said finally, her voice soft with wonder. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be marrying you again, raising a daughter together, building this life, I would have thought they were crazy. James squeezed her hand. Life has a funny way of surprising us. Especially when we let go of trying to control everything and just allow ourselves to be guided by what matters most. As if on cue, Hope's soft cries came through the monitor. They both stood, moving together with the synchronized rhythm of parents who had found their groove. "I'll get her," James said, dropping a kiss on Rachel's forehead. "We'll both go," Rachel countered, taking his hand. Together, they went to comfort their daughter, united by choice rather than obligation, by love that had been tested and proven resilient, by the karma that had indeed brought them full circle, not to where they had been before but to where they were always meant to be. The wedding was nothing like their first. Where that celebration had been elaborate and traditional, this one was intimate and uniquely their own. They chose the community garden where they had painted the mural together, now blooming with spring flowers, as their venue. Friends from the gallery, the foundation, and the community center gathered to witness their recommitment. Hope, now 8 months old and recently taking her first wobbly steps, was carried down the aisle by Rachel's closest friend, wearing a tiny dress made by one of the artisans supported by the foundation. James waited beneath an arch covered in wildflowers, his heart full to bursting as he watched Rachel approach. She wore a simple dress in soft ivory, carrying a bouquet of blooms from their own garden. Her face was radiant with a happiness that needed no enhancement. As she reached him, taking his hands in hers, James was struck by how different this moment felt from their first wedding. Then he had been nervous, focused on the perfect execution of an elaborate event. Now he was present, grounded, certain in a way that came from having lost everything and found his way back to what truly mattered. "Dearly beloved," began the officiant, a community elder who had become a friend to them both. "We gather here not just to witness a beginning, but to celebrate a journey. James and Rachel stand before us today not as two people who have never faced adversity, but as two who have walked through fire and emerged stronger. They come together not in blind optimism, but with eyes wide open to both the challenges and joys of building a life together." Rachel squeezed James's hands, tears glistening in her eyes that matched his own. "In preparing for today," the officiant continued, "I asked James and Rachel what they wanted to communicate in this ceremony. They spoke not of perfect love, but of resilient love. Not of never falling, but of always rising. Not of avoiding pain, but of growing through it, together." From her seat in the front row, Hope babbled happily, reaching toward her parents. Everyone laughed as Rachel's friends struggled to keep the squirming baby contained. "Bring her up," Rachel called, breaking protocol with a smile. "She's part of this too." Hope was passed to James, who held her securely as they continued the ceremony, the three of them together as they exchanged their vows. "Rachel," James began, his voice steady and sure. "5 years ago I made a vow to love and cherish you, and then I broke that vow when fear overwhelmed me. Today I make a new promise, not just to love you in the easy moments but to stand beside you in the hardest ones. To never run from our challenges but to face them together. To be the partner you deserve and the father our daughter needs." He looked down at Hope, who was contentedly playing with his boutonniere. "I promise to honor the incredible strength you've shown in building a beautiful life, and to continue growing into the man worthy of sharing it with you. This time I make these vows not just with words, but with the evidence of my actions every day." Rachel wiped away a tear before beginning her own vows. "James, our journey has not been a straight line. It's been a circle bringing us back to each other but as different people, stronger, wiser, more compassionate. I promise to love you not despite our past but including it. To cherish the man you've become through the challenges you've faced and the growth you've chosen." She reached out to touch Hope's cheek gently. "I promise to build our family on a foundation of honesty, forgiveness, and the kind of love that sees clearly and loves anyway. To remember always that what matters is not the perfect life, but the perfectly imperfect journey we share." As they exchanged rings, simple bands that symbolized their renewed commitment, James felt a profound sense of rightness settle over him. This was what he had been searching for all along, not in external success or societal approval, but in the authentic connection standing before him. "By the power vested in me," the officiant concluded, "and with great joy, I now pronounce you husband and wife, partners in life, and parents to this beautiful child. You may seal your vows with a kiss." As their lips met, Hope clapped her tiny hands in delight, drawing laughter and applause from the gathered community. It was imperfect and unscripted and absolutely perfect in its authenticity. The reception that followed was a true celebration of community. Tables were set up throughout the garden, decorated with wildflowers and handcrafted items from local artisans. Food was provided by the small businesses supported by the foundation, music played by community center students, and toasts offered by friends who had witnessed their journey. James found a moment of quiet with Rachel as evening fell, hope having been whisked away by adoring aunties from the gallery. "How does it feel to be Mrs. CEO again?" he asked teasingly, using the title that had once been applied to her by society columnists. Rachel smiled, shaking her head. "I'm not Mrs. CEO. And you're not just a CEO. We're James and Rachel, partners, parents, community members. The titles don't define us anymore." James nodded, understanding completely. "You know, when I left, I thought success meant proving myself through achievements and acquisitions. I never imagined that true success would mean coming full circle, finding my way back to what really matters." "Karma works in mysterious ways," Rachel said, echoing their conversation from months before. "Sometimes what looks like punishment is actually redirection." "I'm grateful for the redirection," James said softly. "Every day." As if on cue, their friend appeared with Hope, who was beginning to fuss. "I think someone wants her parents," she said, passing the baby to Rachel. Hope immediately calmed, secure in her mother's arms, reaching out to pat James's face with her tiny hand as if making sure he was there too. "We're both here, little one," he assured her. "And we always will be." Later that night, after the celebrations had ended and Hope was asleep in her crib, James and Rachel stood in the garden of their home, looking up at the stars. "What are you thinking?" Rachel asked, noticing his contemplative expression. "I'm thinking about the day I saw you in that restaurant," James replied honestly. "How seeing you pregnant made everything I thought I wanted seem hollow. How terrified I was that I'd lost any chance at real happiness." Rachel leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "And now I know that happiness isn't something you chase. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Thank you for giving me the chance to build it with you." "Thank you for becoming the man worthy of that chance," she replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. Above them, the stars shimmered in the vast night sky, witnesses to the journey that had brought them here, not to an ending but to a new beginning. A beginning built on the foundation of their past, the strength of their present, and the promise of their future together. As they walked hand in hand into their home, toward their sleeping daughter and the life they were creating together, both knew with absolute certainty that this time forever truly began today.